I don't know I don't know why he said that.
But it was insulting, wasn't it,
I don't know why he
James?
said that. I mean, the bottom line is that the only time in the history of NATO where Article 5 has been invoked
Sure.
is in the immediate response of 9/11, an attack on the United States of America. And the United States of America's friends and allies, including the UK and including France, rallied to their support.
Will Keir Starmer and his Conservative opponents at Westminster be in his corner? Early signs are that they will be there. I'm going to be talking live in just a moment to James Cleverly, the former shadow Foreign Secretary and Foreign Secretary in the last Conservative government, who fought Kemi Badenoch for the leadership of the party and lost. Could the crisis turn out to be a defining moment for Starmer's leadership, his Falklands moment, as we called the war, which turned around the fading fortunes of Margaret Thatcher back in the early 1980s? Look, I know there are bigger issues at play, arguably, but can't help wondering, and what do you think? Send me a text, 87222, start with the word Times, or a tweet to @Times Radio. And while you're thinking about that, let me just say hello and good afternoon to James Cleverly. Hello to you, James.
John, hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm well, and big welcome to the programme, James. So look, in the last hour or so, we've seen some movement, haven't we? We heard from Volodymyr Zelensky reaching out to Donald Trump. I'll just a recap of that posting of his on social media. He underlined that he wants to see a deal. He really wants to see a deal between his country and America on access to those mineral rights. And Zelensky hopes for some sort of American security guarantee to back it up. He floated the idea of a truce in the sky and at sea, if not on the ground, in Ukraine. And he again expressed gratitude to America for its support. That must be about the 100th time. I think it may literally have been the 100th time, James, having been accused by the White House of not being grateful. And then he said it was regrettable. That bust up last week, he called it regrettable. Not quite apologising, but it's an expression of regret. And now we've heard in the last few minutes from the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who welcomed what Zelensky has had to say. He talks about, well, no one wanting peace more than Ukraine. And they're going to keep in touch, he said, in these coming days. James, you've seen all this. You've heard what's been said and written. How do you think it leaves us all now?
Well, international diplomacy can happen either privately or publicly. And there are advantages and disadvantages to public diplomacy, and there are advantages and disadvantages to private diplomacy. When I was Foreign Secretary, I was conscious that a lot of the conversations I had, sometimes with allies and sometimes with opponents, were had behind the scenes. And you can't claim credit for the successes, but sometimes it's the best way of getting things done.
Yeah.
Public diplomacy is played out in the full glare of the world with everybody watching. And what we've seen over the last couple of days is some of the challenging conversations that are normally had behind the scenes played out in front of the cameras. And that can be incredibly disconcerting at best and sometimes quite damaging for relationships. Ultimately, I think what the UK, what I've always wanted to see, and this has been in the conversations that I've had with my Ukrainian friends and interlocutors, they want to see Ukraine at peace. They want to see this war come to an end, but they want to see that be sustainable. And the reason the Ukrainians push so hard for these security guarantees is they have been lied to before by President Putin. When they gave up their nuclear arsenal, President Putin promised there would be no invasion. When they signed up in 2014 and the Minsk agreement, there was a promise there'd be no invasion, yet there was an invasion. So they want to make sure that more than warm words, they've got something to prevent it from happening again. And that's why they're holding out for these security guarantees. And I completely agree with them for wanting to do so. But ultimately, of course, they want, because it's their sons and daughters in the firing line, they want to see this come to an end.
I mean, in the cause of common sense, quite apart from peace, James, you would hope and expect Donald Trump will reach out and take the hand that's being held out to him by Zelensky, wouldn't you?
Well, I think that one of the challenges that President Trump has now got is the repercussions, the repercussions of the rhetoric that he has used in the past. That he's very much a deal maker. That he could do a deal very, very quickly. That President Zelensky should trust him and rely on him. And because he's framed that in such a way, there is a huge domestic audience within the United States of America
Yeah.
who cannot understand why President Zelensky is not jumping at the chance to get this deal done. And of course, the world is more complicated than that. And what, from an American viewpoint, might seem as a no brainer, from a Ukrainian point of view, who've had their fingers burnt time and time again through Putin's deceit and dishonesty, they see the world very, very differently. And the contrast between that domestic US audience point of view and the Ukrainian point of view, I think is going to make life harder for President Trump to get a sustainable deal that sees Ukraine return to peace, but also a predictable and sustainable peace. That's going to be really hard.
But it does seem as if Zelensky is ready to take the deal that was on the table last Friday when the whole thing blew up in appalling acrimony. I don't think he's calling for different terms in the deal itself. He does want stronger US guarantees than he's been promised so far. But as for that deal and signing on the bottom line, he seems ready to do it, in which case surely Trump should say, yes, sign here, and then they can keep on talking. To call for some sort of more grovelling apology, surely that would be just quite unjustifiable on Trump's part.
Well, the President of the United States of America is always a high-profile individual. And as I say, when diplomacy is played out on the television cameras, there'll be a load of American voters who will have seen that confrontation. And perhaps their patriotic urge would be to see, this Ukrainian guy who had a row with their president say sorry. And that might be a driver for this. But ultimately, I've made this point to my contacts in America and the Republican Party, both before the election and subsequently, that there are lots of regimes around the world watching how we're dealing with the situation in Ukraine and Russia's brutal aggression. They're watching in Beijing, they're watching in Pyongyang, they're watching in Tehran and elsewhere. And I've said to my American friends, we can choose what message we broadcast internationally. I think the message is we stand by our commitments, we defend our allies, and we don't lose interest after a couple of years. And that's why it's so important that we maintain the support to Ukraine, because other regimes will judge our future intentions by what they see us do in the here and now. And we better show results, or the world will be more dangerous in the future.
All right, then look. Do you have a clear position on this? J.D. Vance, dismissing as he did the idea of an assurance for, say, a coalition of the willing, France and Britain side by side in the forefront of all of that. And he spoke about 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. James, that was just insulting, wasn't it?
I don't know why he said that.
But it was insulting, wasn't it?
I don't know why he said that. I mean, the bottom line is that the only time in the history of NATO where Article 5 has been invoked is in the immediate response of 9/11, an attack on the United States of America. And the United States of America's friends and allies, including the UK and including France, rallied to their support. British service personnel lost their lives supporting America. And it was, I think, a foolish and insulting throwaway remark. I understand that he's not edited, but he is explained his position, but I think it was a hurtful and thoughtless remark.
Well, he suggested,
to those
James,
people who have lost loved ones.
Sure, he suggested, James, that he wasn't referring to France and Britain. There's no one else he could conceivably have been referring to. And we've heard from your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, who says, I don't think he actually said that. Well, we know what he said because we heard what he said. Do you think she needs to maybe think a bit more clearly about her response and maybe line up more clearly on the side of France and Britain on this one?
Well, it's important for the leader of a political party to maintain, good working relationships with our sister parties and governments across the world. I completely understand that. But what J.D. Vance said, and as you say, it was France and Germany that were talking about that reassurance force. No one else was talking about it. And whether he meant to or not is beside the point. It sounded as if he were talking about French and British armed forces when he made that dismissive.
Well, you made the point that it's insulting. You made the point that it's insulting. And I know, James, you are, well, I mean, I think you still are a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve, aren't you? So you speak with that sort of, I suppose, moral authority on your side.
Well, the point is, the UK and others, but the UK and the United States of America's armed forces have stood and fought shoulder to shoulder with each other on many occasions. The United States came to our support during the 20th century, and we have come to the support of the United States of America. There is a genuine bond of friendship between our respective militaries, and I think implying that somehow one of the partners in that relationship has not been pulling its weight. I think it was wrong in fact. I think it was wrong in tone. And I'm very glad that the Vice President has issued a correction. And
well, his correction is not plausible. The problem is the correction is not at all plausible. But I'll move on, and grateful to you, James, for coming along and sharing your views with us this afternoon.
Thank you.